This is the module where the rubber meets the road. This is the module when you finally begin to think about what it is that you will actually do for your dissertation. And I know this is a pressing question for many of you out there. And the way that you think about this question, what will I actually do for my dissertation, is very closely tied to questions of ethics. Now, when we hear the word ethics, many of us might think about weighty dilemmas or sort of philosophical scenarios. Why would we think about ethics before deciding on something as practical as a research methodology? Well, it is because the presence of an observer changes the reality being observed. We all know this, at least in part, intuitively, right? So for example, I am in the media studio at Bethel right now with Molly and Josh and Kyle, and I know you are going to be there, that you are going to watch this video. So the me that you see on the screen is not exactly the same as the me who sat all by myself in the living room last night when my kids were asleep and when I prayed for them and prayed for you. And that me on the couch last night was different than the one that you would have seen at 5 a.m. This morning when I sang Wheels on the Bus with my children, right? So the act of observation, the fact that there is an observer present and the person of the observer change the reality that is being observed. Your study is going to change the reality that you research. And since for most of you it is people being researched, we need to think really carefully about how we are changing their reality by studying them. We are slightly different people when we're observed and when we're not observed, and we behave differently depending on who observes us. And it turns out this is not even unique to humans. It turns out that even electrons behave differently when they are observed and when they are not. In physics, it's been replicated over and over in highly controlled experiments that photons behave like particles when they are being watched, and they behave like waves when they are not. Isn't that crazy? So whatever we study, the act of observation changes the reality that we are observing. And the more observation, the more interference in that which is being observed. And that is true of both humans and electrons. So even when you are doing quantitative research, by studying something, you are drawing attention to it. And in the process, you change people's reality. You draw their attention somewhere that it would not go on its own, right? So to give you an example, for my dissertation, I interviewed high-level academic leaders and policymakers. And these are people whose days are very busy, and they normally don't involve sitting down for an hour with a friendly stranger to reflect on what they believe to be the proper mission of a university, right? So the fact that I drew their attention to my research question changed their reality. And in this case, many of them told me it changed their reality for the better. It made them think about things that they want to think about more, but they often don't have time for. And in your case, unless you do archival research, what you are working on in this class, your research question, will become a springboard for intervening in the lives of other people. And you will have the power to request their time and attention and to draw their attention to something. That is a great power. And as Peter Parker's Uncle Ben says in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So our question this week is, how will your intervention in other people's lives, this intervention we call research, do good? How will it do good and not harm? Now, none of us mean to do harm, right? But even in our family lives, we've all learned how often we unintentionally hurt those we love without ever meaning to. And if this is true of people we know well, of people we love, we need to be all the more mindful of this with people we do not know as well, people whose reality is often quite different than ours. And this is especially important in qualitative research. This is the kind of research that involves more time and more engagement with the population that you are going to study. The truth is that the questions you ask may cause people stress. They may cause people discomfort. People may feel embarrassed that they don't know the answer, or they may be embarrassed by the answer they do know. They may feel uncomfortable with your presence in their space, or they may feel like their privacy has been invaded. The things that you ask may carry a threat to their reputation in some way. And all of these things are ethical concerns. Now, you are not a medical researcher and you're not manipulating people's bodies, but what you draw attention to and the way in which you do that, the way in which you relate to people through your research, will cause neurons to fire in their brains in ways they would not have otherwise. And the questions you ask and your presence with people will cause informational substances to flow through their bodies. Because the truth is that if you do research with people, that will affect people's emotions. And this is true whether you do qualitative or quantitative research. Why will anybody fill out your survey? Well, because they're curious, or because they're angry about something that they really want to tell you about, or because they will feel compassion for you because they were once a graduate student too. So we now know emotions are embodied, and so you will be affecting minds, you'll be affecting souls, and you'll be affecting bodies by the research that you do. So this is a holy honor. Doing research with people is an honor, and it comes with a holy responsibility. It is a basic premise of Christian ethics that people are created in the image of God. They are worthy of utmost respect and utmost dignity. And the people who be involved in your study are going to be complex persons with complex histories. They have made good and bad decisions. They've done as well as they could have given their history and their circumstances, and their time and their attention are their most valuable, non-renewable resources. What you will be doing is you will be asking for their time and their attention. So if there's just one thing that you remember from this lecture, it's that we must never treat people as research subjects alone. And this is why, before you do any research at all with human participants, your proposal must be reviewed by an institutional review board. And this is a lot more than just a procedural requirement. What it is the scholarly community of Bethel University coming alongside you to consider the possible unintended harm that could come from the way that your study of a reality changes that reality. Ethical concerns will inform your research design. And this was recently experienced by one of our students, Pam, who did a case study at a culturally diverse high school, which boasted a very high graduation rate. So what Pam was interested in was why this school succeeded when so many other similar schools fail diverse students. And what she was particularly interested in was the role of validating students' cultural identity in fostering their academic success. So initially, what Pam wanted to do is she wanted to interview students and parents, right, to find out what their experience with the school has been. But in conversations with the school principal, she realized that this approach carried a lot of risk for a vulnerable group of people who frequently speak English as a second language. And the principal, who was the gatekeeper in terms of access to this school, was just not comfortable with this risk. So what Pam ended up doing is she ended up doing focus groups and interviews with teachers, and she added on-campus observations and document analysis. And what this was a very different study than the one that she originally envisioned. It was a study that altered the reality of this school, but it did so in ways that did not do unintended harm to students. What it actually did is it really boosted teachers' morale because it drew their attention to the things that they did at their school that really served students well. So what this example illustrates well is that ethics are an integral part of research design. And there is no single recipe or a single key for a good dissertation that does good without doing harm. Because ethics for every one of you are going to be situational and they're going to be relational. And the reason that you have your committee in your corner is that we want to help you navigate these ethical dilemmas as they arrive. And what Pam's example also illustrates is that an ethical approach to research is going to vary a great deal depending on the population that you want to study. And generally, the greater the difference between you and your participants, especially in terms of social status, the more ethical questions you will need to think about. And you will need to allow these questions to guide your design. The bottom line this week is that the validity and the credibility of your study depend on your ethics. And ethical research is about treating people as whole people, not just research subjects from whom you can get a good story. So when you do qualitative research, you enter into a relationship, and a relationship creates bonds of responsibility. You have the rare opportunity to make the world a better place by the things to which you draw people's attention and by the things that you choose to observe. So, what waves on the waters of life will you create with your research? That is our question for you this week.